Welcome to In the Archives, the Great American Songbook Archives, with me, Michael Feinstein. It is a great pleasure to share some of these pieces of music with all of you, because one of the things that is fun for me as a musical scholar is to discover songs that I don't know and discover things about songwriters that I did not know. And there are so many songwriters who were incredibly gifted, whose names might not be well known to the general public because they worked on projects that weren't necessarily successful or had other situations that kept them from becoming household names. But that does not diminish their musical and cultural influence on society. And the composer of whom I wish to speak at this moment is an example of a very important and I think significant composer and songwriter whose name you might not know. His name is Gorney. Jay is best known for a single song, as sometimes happens with a songwriter where they will have a huge hit that eclipses all of their other work. In the case of Jay Gorney, it's a song called Brother, Can You Spare a Dime?, which was written in the early 1930s for a Broadway revue called Americana, and immediately struck a nerve with the public because in that period it was the Great American Depression. People were out of work and desperate to find just the simple means for survival. And it was the inclination of songwriters in that time to write songs to cheer people up, to bolster their flagging spirits. And that did help to a certain degree. But Jay Gorney and his collaborator E.Y. Yip Harburg wrote the first song that sincerely and directly addressed the sadness and tragedy of the Great American Depression with Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? And so the song was something that immediately resonated with the public and became what I would call a slow-blooming perennial, because it wasn't something that could become necessarily a hit song because of its subject, but culturally and historically it has become more and more important with time because it captured a sense of the pathos of that time in a way that otherwise does not exist. Now, Jay Gorney began writing songs in the early 1920s and wrote for Broadway revues, and his collection of music donated by his family reflects the totality of his career from the 1920s into the 1970s, and his collaborators were mighty. He collaborated with many wonderful songwriters, early lyrical giants such as Harold Atteridge and Stanley Adams, and later, after Yip Harburg, he wrote with Harold Adamson and so many different writers. And yet, the bedrock of his accomplishments from the early days are the songs that he wrote with Yip Harburg. E.Y. Yip Harburg is best known for having written the lyrics to the song Over the Rainbow and the score of The Wizard of Oz with Harold Arlen. But Yip's first collaborator as a songwriter was with Jay Gorney. And it was Yip's very close friend Ira Gershwin who suggested to Yip that he team up with this guy Jay Gorney. And they started writing songs together. So Yip Harburg always said that he owed his career to Ira Gershwin for putting him together with Jay Gorney, with whom he eventually wrote Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? And in Gorney's collection, he had a folder that was all of the songs that he had written with Yip Harburg. And early on, he wrote a song called What Wouldn't I Do for That Man, sung by Helen Morgan for a Ziegfeld movie, and then wrote the score with Yip for a fun movie called Moonlight and Pretzels. I think they also wrote a song. Did they write it? Love and Nuts and Noodles. That was Yip with somebody else. What Wouldn't I Do for That Man? Helen Morgan in Applause, which was a 1929 feature film produced by the great Florenz Ziegfeld of Ziegfeld Follies fame, as I mentioned. So, here is a vintage copy of Brother, Can You Spare a Dime that is dog-eared, appropriately, I think, that Mr. Gorney probably had to play and sing this song a great number of times at parties and at events because it was so significant and remains so. So we have this wonderful, wonderful collection of songs that not only are musically and lyrically fascinating, but just looking at the artwork is in itself a sociological study. And so one can learn a lot from looking at the career of Jay Gorney. And then there are all kinds of unpublished pieces of music that are in his files that never saw the light of day, that have a chance now to do so because they're part of our collection. And this is a manuscript. I have no idea for what it was written, but this is Jay Gorney's pencil manuscript of the Avocado Song. And I have a particular propensity for avocados because I have a ranch where I grow them, so maybe this will become our theme song. The lyrics are by a gentleman named Les Pine, and I don't know anything about Les Pine. Before I hand this over to another representative of the legacy of Jay Gorney, I want to show you this folder because this is titled Historical Songs by Jay Gorney. And he wrote the music for a very important Broadway revue called Meet the People, which was one of those wartime empowering American musical revues. Actually, Meet the People might have started before the war, but Jay wrote a lot of patriotic songs and was particularly committed to writing songs that would share the history of our United States and would teach that history to young people through music and lyrics. So this folder consists exclusively of songs on patriotic subjects. Some of them are published and known, and some of them are completely obscure. But one could do a beautiful history lesson just through these songs written by Jay Gorney. For Meet the People, which I see says Review 1940, so it was pre-World War II. And then these other songs that are so fascinating. And Jay also wrote songs with Lewis Allen. Lewis Allen was the pseudonym of Abe Meeropol, who now is best remembered for having written the song Strange Fruit, which became a classic tragic song sung by Billie Holiday. Now, to speak more about the legacy of Jay Gorney, we turn to our friends at the New York Public Library.
I'm Bob Kozofsky, librarian for rare books and manuscripts or special collections in the Music and Recorded Sound Division of the New York Public Library. And we work here at the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts. I basically oversee rare books, rare scores, rare items that come into the library, as well as archival collections and anything having to do with that. So our Jay Gorney materials are divided amongst two divisions. Material having to do with his theatrical productions are in the Billy Rose Theater division. His musical materials are with the Music and Recorded Sound division. And they basically cover his entire career. Published music, unpublished music, sketches, things that he was exploring. And it really is a wonderful collection to examine the entire course of his career, to examine his process, not just the finished products, but the process, how he achieved these kinds of things. It also complements other collections we have. For example, we have Yip Harburg's papers. And of course, everyone knows the most famous song, Brother, Can You Spare a Dime, which the lyrics were written in Yip Harburg. I think there's a special continuity, a special magic that occurs that when you have the collections of two different people who collaborated at one point, to be able to see both sides of the story. We're able to do that with Jerry Bach, and we have some of Sheldon Harnick's material. But to be able to do it with Jay Gorney and Yip Harburg, that collaborated, and especially that emblematic song, but on other works they did, it's for those people who are exploring the creative process, it's a wonderful opportunity to discover these things. And anybody can do it. You know, New York Public Library, anybody, as long as we're open, anybody can come in and look at this material and examine it for themselves and come to their own conclusions. For instance, in the case of Jay Gorney, you know, that one song, Brother, Can You Spare a Dime, is incredibly famous. You know, the style of that song is basically influenced by the European style of Kurt Weill, Paul Dessau, and Hans Eisler. This kind of, but those people in Europe took a more political attitude toward it. That kind of steady beat rhythm. That especially Hans Eisler, who was very political and drawn to the communists, did it for those kinds of songs. Whereas in America, they also used that same kind of song, but there it became a more of a personal plea and to have empathy for the common person who needed rescue from the depths of the Depression. And these kinds of songs were lent a sense of hope as well as recognition that these people needed help. Well, the wonderful thing about having archival collections that we have here at the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts and at the library in general is that we have the major bulk of what they left to us. So it really covers most, if not all, of their entire career, and allows you to see their growth, what they did, what they explored. People's trajectory is never a straight line. They're always going in different directions, trying out this, trying out that. And to have a composer's or a lyricist's papers is really an amazing opportunity to be able to explore that. It's very typical of songwriters of that time. You know, they started out for the stage, maybe writing reviews, and then they go to Hollywood. And Hollywood somehow, you know, the songs that you write for the stage tend to be a little bit more sophisticated. I hate to say it, but many of them are written for the Broadway stage here in New York. And that the audience for that really demanded a kind of sophistication, a knowledge for what was going on. Whereas songs written for Hollywood required more of a broader kind of approach, less sophisticated, more melodic. And in the case of so many songwriters, they try Hollywood and then they come back to New York and they have to recapture again that, or they want to recapture that sophistication. And I think Jay Gorney is a great example of that, his early songs did have a kind of biting quality, dealing with the public issues of the time. Brother, Can You Spell a Dime is just one of those. His review, Meet the People, which was made into a film, that also has a lot of songs that dealt with the current issues of the time. And then later on, he sort of goes back to dealing with more love and that kind of feeling. Perhaps it's such that it's sophistication that doesn't have a wide appeal, but does have an appeal, say, to a cabaret kind of a crowd, where you have a singer who's intoning and really speaking to the audience, not just singing a song, but trying to communicate more of what's in the song and what that particular performer is trying to say. There's a wonderful recording of Billie Holiday singing You're My Thrill, and it's so intimate, even though it's a recording, late in both people's careers. It has such an intimacy that even though it's a recording, you feel as if you're right there with her. It's a wonderful experience. Thanks to Michael Feinstein and the American Songbook Foundation for highlighting the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts and the collections that we have. Anyone who's further interested can come visit us at our website, www.nypl.org, or you can simply come to Lincoln Center when we're open, walk in the doors, and the staff will be happy to help you.